Hello everyone, and welcome to the show.
If you should awaken, I will be there when you wake from your lovely
Today's show is going to be about the making of Eve. The Bible explains that Eve was taken from the rib of Adam. Simply put, it implies that they took a rib out of Adam, which left him with one less rib, and they put the rib somewhere and it turned into a woman. Okay, so I don't blame the atheists for not quite agreeing with that one. I sure couldn't, because it doesn't make any sense. However, what does make sense is that when Eve was created, over time, in order to make her body function, give her breed ability, they found out that she was missing a chromosome. One of her chromosomes was missing, so they found out that in species you need some with an X and an XX and some with an XY. Well, simply, Eve had a missing chromosome. They were able to take this chromosome out of the marrow in the rib. They chose a rib because they felt that it will heal quickly, and they could have taken it from any kind of bone, but they took it from the rib simply because it was accessible and it wouldn't hurt as much. So basically, they took this chromosome from Adam, and gave it to Eve, which gave her her breed ability. Her breedability was very important because when they started making species, they did not want them to breed the way that their progenitors were breeding, the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki had relationships, sexual relationships. Not very deep ones, kind of very in a superficial kind of, okay, let's do this kind of way. And so basically, that's what made them special, and they did not want their created beings to be like them in procreation. They didn't want them to be like them because they were created to be a subservient race. And the more they made them like them, the more difficulty they knew they would find in making and creating a subservient race. They wanted more of a primate than they did a human. But Enki, who created the beings himself, basically, he was just trying to do the best he could. He had to up level their intellect, their dexterity, and the problem with the breedability is it would take a womb goddess. Basically, they had to have a woman, a female, to implant and then have a child. Well, imagine trying to populate a world of a group of people that you needed to work for you, but you had to populate them in a way that the woman, and then 9 months later, boom, It was too much. So they had to create them. Anki felt that what he needed to do was put the breedability so they can just make love with each other and then each other the same way the animals do it, and the rats and the bees and all that, because they didn't have time to womb goddess all of these newborn people that they needed to work the mind. This is where the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden comes in. Enlil, who is Yahweh, we have determined, I hope you have determined at this point, Yahweh and Enlil is the same person. Yahweh, whose brother created the human beings, and Yahweh did not want them to be created because he knew they weren't supposed to be creating a slave race in the first place. Yahweh protested it. But it was Yahweh's job to oversee the operations on earth. So he was the inspector for Adam and Eve. He was the person that was supposed to come in at the end to see how it all happened. It took 100 years, human years, but for the Anunnaki, that wasn't long at all. And it took all this time, so he was gone. Now he came back to the garden to inspect, to find out what the progress and the nature of these new beings were. He was upset, number one, that they looked like that they looked like them. The whole fact that they were made in the image of the Elohims was disturbing to him. It pissed him off. They were supposed to make pets. They weren't supposed to make equivalents of the Anunnaki. But they looked like them. And then what upset him was that they procreated like them. Now that was really upsetting to him, but when he found out that they weren't giving the branch of long living, they weren't able to live as long as him, that's the one thing that he was happy about. He was happy about that, but he was still pissed. So he's happy and he's pissed. So what he does is he kicks Enki and Hermes out of the Garden of Eden. He kicks them out because he's pissed off, but he's also a little glad that they are not quite what the Anunnakis are in their lifespan. Hermes and Enki knew that they were going to be labeled as an evil serpent, as a snake in the grass, because you guys, you did this, but I didn't want you to do it, and you did it anyway, but let them be where they're needed. So the Garden of Eden story, the people who got kicked out of the garden wasn't Adam and Eve. It was Enki and Hermes were kicked out because they made them, but they weren't kicked out. They just got cursed out, pretty much. They got cursed out. Hermes is the one who decided that these people are going to need some kind of support. They're going to need to be educated. They're going to need to learn how to be people. And so that's when he created the secret society of the snake to teach them how to be humans. Okay, check out the video and we'll be back.
Chapter 25, The Making of Eve. To create a female, Thoth planted a zygote made of Adamu's blood into Dimkina, one of the surrogates at his lab in Zimbabwe. When the zygote grew to a viable female fetus, Ninmah excised her from Dimkina. Ninmah named the hybrid Tiamat, Mother of Life. She was a sandy blonde. Thoth put ova from Tiamat into 7 test tubes. Then he planted the 7 ova into the same doctors who bore the hybrid males. All of the surrogate mothers carried female hybrids, which he removed surgically. But when he told the doctors he needed their wombs again, Ninmah objected.
For my heroines, too burdensome is burying more earthlings. Too few of the heroines to bad numbers to work at those mines.
Enki brought Adamu and Tiamat to Eden. He left the 7 females and 8 male hybrids made from Adamu and Tiamat's gametes together in an enclosure at his African lab. They copulated often, but the females did not conceive. In the meantime, the miners threatened to mutiny if Enki and Thoth did not bring slaves to relieve them. Under pressure at the Med Center in Sherubak, Thoth compared Nibiruan genes and the genes from Adamu and Tiamat. He found the genes for reproduction. Nibiruan females had a recessive X chromosomal allele, a variant from a given gene in their genotype, whereas Tiamat had only XX. To make the hybrids breedable, Thoth anesthetized Enki, Ninmah, and Tiamat. From the rib of Enki, the life essence he extracted. Into the rib of Adamu, the life essence he inserted. From the rib of Ninmah, the life essence he extracted. Into the rib of Tiamat, the life essence he inserted. He proudly declared,
"To their tree of life 2 branches have been added with procreating powers. Their life essence are now entwined."
thus giving truth and understanding to the biblical account of the creation of man in the image of the gods. Enki, Ninmah, and Thoth try to hide Tiamat's newly installed breedability, or shall we say, their genitalia, but not until Enki himself was the first to impregnate his female creation. Tiamat and Adam hid outside Enki's Persian Gulf orchard where her fetus gestated. Tiamat made leaf aprons for herself and Adamu. Enki sent Adamu and Tiamat from Africa to Eden. In Eden, Enlil saw that Adam and Eve wore leaf aprons and seemed to be hiding something. Enlil made Enki explain. Enki confessed that Tiamat's fetus would in turn breed successfully. Enlil questioned Enki and Hermes.
It appears that the last bit of our life's essence to these creatures you have given. They even look like us.
He raged. To Enlil, it was the same as humans creating pets for companionship with human faces.
They shall now be like us in procreation. Perchance has our 1,000 years life cycle been bestowed upon them as well?
Roared the shouting and seething Lord.
They were supposed to create mind-hooking slaves, not relatives to the Anunnaki, in test tubes with surrogate Nibiruan mothers.
Then Thoth explained to Enlil that they had denied the hybrids of the genes of long life.
"My lord Enlil,"
said Thoth,
"their essence tree was not given the branch of long living. I altered the longevity gene with regions of repetitive nucleotide sequences at each end called telomeres. This shall result in complete control of the lifespan of the beings. We are, in essence, truly their life-giving, life-sustaining gods,"
said Thoth. With the knowledge of all this, Enlil felt that Enki and Hermes had far exceeded his expectations.
Then let them be where they are needed.
Enlil with anger said,
To the Apsu, away from the Eden, let them be expelled.
After Enlil evicted the hybrid earthlings from Eden, Enki knew that Enlil would limit them and slander him, and he would forever be labeled an evil serpent. So Enki set up the secret Brotherhood of the Snake. He, along with his assistant Thoth, would teach a few Earthlings medical facts, technologies, and advanced thinking. And thus the caduceus, the medical symbol of Hermes, was bestowed upon Enki and Hermes as a result of the Garden of Eden event. A staff with two snakes rising in celebration of creation, thus bringing the biblical serpent condemnation myth to rest. Enki put Adamu and Tiamat in an enclosure in Zimbabwe where Tiamat bore the twins Cain and Abel. Then others who in turn bred with each other and with Nibiruans. In a few thousand years, the Earthlings were proliferating. To be with the Anunnaki, they were eager. For food rations, they toiled well. Of heat and dust, they did not complain. Of backbreaking, they did not grumble. Of hardship of work, they did not complain. The Anunnaki were relieved. The Earthlings worked the African mines in submersible cargo boats. In just 10 days, they brought the gold from the mines of Batu Biru to Sumer, Iraq. They were then turned to smelt, refined, then into portable ingots for transshipment to Mars. From Mars, astronauts rocketed the gold to Nibiru, where scientists refined it into white powder of monatomic gold to float into the holes in their ozone. The holes shrunk. The vital gold to Nibiru was coming steadily. Nibiru's atmosphere was slowly healing. In South Africa, from Mozambique to Botswana, Zimbabwe, and beyond, where the descendants of Adamu labored for the Nibiruans. The extended ancient settlement covered an area much larger than modern Johannesburg, more than 500,000 square kilometers. Nibiruans gave Earthlings food and shelter while they performed grueling tasks, the reasons for which they had little understanding. The mineral gold they mined had no value to them. They could not eat it or use it in any way. The Nibiruan royals, their staff, and the astronaut corps needed a steady stream of fresh laborers for projects. One of Nibiru's 3,600-year cycles approached Earth. The inner solar system upset Earth's climate and ruined them of new crops. Earthlings adapted and foraged afar but made less food. From 27,000 BC, Earthlings' standard of living worsened, and they took again to the bush and cave dwellings. Following generations showed less advanced standards of civilized life. From 27,000 to 11,000, the regressing and dwindling population reached almost complete absence of habitation. And Lil prodded Enki to make them smart enough to farm and herd better. Enki decided to up-level the Earthlings' intelligence and, at the same time, enjoy himself.
Welcome back. That was the creation of Eve. Now, the next chapter is the one that is mind-blowing from the standpoint that a mistake was made. What happened was when Enki created Adam and Eve, and he had given them the ability to breed. There were certain things he knew about species and their DNA that would make them more breedable. He kind of shaped Eve in a way that he could appreciate. The way these beings were created, they would affect the brain like crack cocaine. It's like when you take crack cocaine, I've never taken crack cocaine, but I've seen what crack does. It's like some people tell me the first time you take it, you're hooked on it. You don't even know why you're hooked, because the same feeling you got the first time you did it never comes back, but you are constantly trying to get more of it. That's what Enki did to the female. He did it so much and he made the females so attractive and so alluring that not only did the men find them impossible to resist, but the Anunnaki found them impossible to resist. This chapter, called The Claibornes, are about those very alluring human beings that Enki created. And like I said, women are flawed. The flaw is they made you too hot. They made you a little too spicy and too alluring and too much, too addicting. Check out this chapter about these hot Claibornes. We'll be back.
Chapter 26, The Claibornes. The first incarnation of human beings on Earth was a disaster from the beginning. Many unforeseen side effects overwhelmed not only the population of Anunnaki, but also the angels in the heavens as well. Because these beings were created with not only the DNA of species, but the actual flesh and blood of the womb goddess as well. Such actions caused chaos and the most anomalous side effects imaginable. These Claibornes were born maleficent, meaning they had a spiritual ability to be both powerful of spirit and also extremely seductive in a chemical, logical manner. From the moment they began to mature, and in most cases, before then even, they would affect the Anunnaki beings in ways that they had never before observed. One of the most important factors in species is the capacity of spirit. The capacity, or its capaciousness, is determined by the amount of dimethyltryptamine, DMT, that is stored in the pineal gland of the species. This DMT is a chemical substance that occurs in plants, animals, and all living things. The larger the capacity, the greater the spiritual acuity within each species. At the time, this was an unknown fact to the Anunnaki. Hermes had a much more complete connection to God. God showed Hermes spiritually how to increase said capacity, as Enki was completely unaware. Because of this, the eventual depth of spiritual growth within the Claibornes could in time surpass the Anunnaki. This is what makes the newly created beings the true sons and daughters of God. At the time, it was also believed by many that Satan himself, who had wanted to be a god of the human creation, and was denied, found a way to manipulate the ways and means of antiquated formulas, providing opportunities to enter many unnecessary ingredients to said recipe. These factors would give the beings abilities like no other, abilities that could affect people in the same ways that opioid addictions cause brain mesolimbic dopamine in systems, rewarding pathways stimulating many types of reinforcing stimuli. In short, the Claibornes were highly addictive. Even the aroma of the beings would attack the brain cells, causing vasodilation of inordinate abundance. The memories of these beings would forever be imprinted in the brain cells like sudden blindness, or perhaps even quantum entanglement, or as Albert Einstein would have put it, very spooky action at a distance. So insatiable were they that the Anunnaki would use the humans as weapons against their enemies until even they too became overwhelmed and addicted, as was the case of the naked harlot and Enkidu in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So tantalizing and riveting were the clay-born beings that the angels in heaven discussed with God a life in the physical world, just to experience the bewitching and provocative human reanimation. They would inject their spirits into humans before birth, so they would be angels that simply look like humans or Nephilims. Genesis 6:1-4. But these weren't just any angels. Some of these angels, both male and female, were obnoxious and infantile. Some of these angels were groomed by the archangel Satan, and they were very evil, and they brought these behaviors with them and into the human persona. Even Satan himself could not resist and became one of the many humans that came down to become human, then mate with humans, causing sin to run rampant, bereft of compassion and civility as it flowed throughout the virtuous and preparatory, uncontaminated world. Once the angels became human, they could not leave the human experience until they evolved as humans, meaning that for some angels, this would be a one-way trip, or at least it could possibly take them several lifetimes to regrow their spirits to the highest level necessary to exist in the highest heavenly realms from whence they came. The temptations of life on earth were too hard to resist, for on earth they saw mountains of beauty that had solid mass, with textures and residues that linger, and beautiful rivers that moisten the flesh, and ocean. Even the overwhelming sensations of taste and salt, and the soft feelings of silks and moss. The notion of living among the redwood trees in the forest and the woods, in the mountains and the valleys, were too great a temptations for the angels to resist. Nevertheless, I know most of us have encountered a maleficent sexual person that we found hard to escape from if we're lucky. As the human population burst, so too did the offspring of the giants that were the result of the breeding between the Anunnaki and the humans. Their offspring were called the Nephilims of the Bible and would exist on earth forevermore. The Atlanteans were small by comparison, so were the humans from the land of Kim. We have found Anunnaki fossil remains, red-haired beings discovered all over the globe at the height of 7 feet or 7 foot 5 inches or more. The offspring of the Nephilims averaged between 6 foot 5 and 7 feet. By those standards, the National Basketball Association would be the Anunnaki, and the National Football League would be the Nephilims, and the Ajiji would be the African pygmy.
Thank you for coming.
I'll be there when you wait for your love. Your
subscribe and push the like button.